When you sign a standard contract like a mortgage or, say, a commercial lease, the terms of default are just explicitly laid out in black and white.
Right. It's totally objective.
Yeah, I mean, you pay this much, you get to keep the house. And if the payments stop, there are clear, legal, highly visible mechanisms to deal with the breach, right? Everyone knows exactly what the failure state looks like.
Absolutely. The parameters of success and failure are agreed upon way before you ever even take possession of the asset.
But, you look at marriage vows. For better or for worse, it is arguably the ultimate contract two people can enter into, yet the terms of default are just, well, they're entirely subjective.
Yeah, they really are.
So what happens when the worse isn't some external force, like, a shared struggle against the economy or health or the outside world? What happens when the worse is actually a psychological cage built by the person you're supposed to trust most?
Oh, wow. That is a profoundly suffocating space to exist in.
Right. What do you do when the contract rots from the inside out, but nobody in your community is allowed to acknowledge the smell?
Because you're trapped in this foundational agreement that is fractured, but
Right.
but the fracture is completely invisible to the outside world. It's this quiet, highly destructive kind of isolation.
And that silent destruction is exactly the space we are stepping into today. So welcome to today's deep dive. It is April 13th, 2026, and we are unpacking a story that absolutely does not ask for your permission.
No, it definitely does not.
And it definitely does not apologize for where it takes you. We are exploring excerpts from the highly provocative 2026 novel Revenge Between My Lover's Legs by Euftis Emery.
Such an intense read.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I have to set the stage here because the question posed in the author's preface is one that will just echo through every single scene we discuss today. And that is, if love fails you, what are you willing to become in its absence?
It's a striking premise, honestly. It immediately pulls you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we are not analyzing a traditional romance here, nor is this a standard psychological thriller. We're looking at a deeply raw narrative about marital breakdown, systemic religious hypocrisy, and really the mechanics of power.
Right.
Specifically, how absolute powerlessness in a person's public life can push them to weaponize sex and dominance in the shadows.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can even begin to look at how the protagonist, Euftis, seeks out this dark revenge, we kind of have to understand the specific gravity of the nightmare he is trapped in at home.
Exactly. You have to grasp the environment that serves as the catalyst for his descent.
We have to examine the fracture of his vows. So let's introduce you to Euftis and his wife, Leata.
Ooh.
This isn't just a marriage going through a rough patch, or dealing with a basic communication breakdown.
No, not at all.
It is a profoundly toxic environment, entirely overshadowed by Leata's untreated schizophrenia. And the author forces you to look at the ugly reality of this.
Yeah, he really doesn't hold back.
Like, there are these vivid, terrifying scenes in the middle of the night where Leata is reacting to a disembodied voice. She is literally screaming in her husband's ear, "I can hear your heart and it is foul."
The portrayal of her mental illness here is incredibly visceral. It's not a quiet, retreating depression. It is a loud, chaotic, and aggressive intrusion into their shared sanctuary.
Yeah, it makes the home a place of constant hypervigilance for Euftis.
Completely.
And here is the truly staggering contradiction. She flat out refuses psychiatric help. Instead of going to a doctor, she relies entirely on faith healers.
Right.
But she doesn't just seek comfort in religion. She actively weaponizes it. She uses her distorted version of faith to belittle Euftis.
Yeah, she claims he hasn't saved enough to lead their household.
Exactly. And she actually blames his lack of faith for the fact that she hasn't been miraculously healed.
What's fascinating here is the author's portrayal of how mental health and extreme religious dogma can just intertwine to create a perfect storm of abuse.
Oh, absolutely.
Leata is using her faith to establish a highly toxic power dynamic. She systematically makes Euftis feel spiritually inadequate as a man and a husband, while simultaneously granting herself a total pass on taking any accountability for the sheer chaos she is inflicting on their home.
Which is wild.
And we have to remember they have 3 young daughters living in this environment. It is a masterful manipulation tactic, completely disguised as pious suffering.
Yeah, to put in perspective, it's like having a car with a completely shattered engine block. Yeah. Right? And instead of taking it to a mechanic, you just stand in the driveway praying over the hood.
Right.
And then you turn around and scream at your spouse because their prayers aren't fixing the transmission. Like eventually you have to call a tow truck.
That's a great analogy.
But I do want to push back on the narrative framing here for just a second.
Yeah.
We are getting this story strictly from Euftis's perspective.
Sure.
So wait, is he genuinely just a helpless victim of his wife's tragic illness? Or is he using her instability as a highly convenient excuse to completely emotionally check out of the marriage and justify his own desires?
See, that is the brilliant tension the author deliberately creates. The text doesn't give you a perfectly innocent victim.
No, it doesn't.
Euftis is undeniably enduring severe emotional abuse and gaslighting, but his response is a calculated, chilling detachment. He stops viewing Leata as a partner in pain and starts viewing her as a logistical problem he has to manage. He builds a wall.
And the way she forces his hand to build that wall is incredibly dark.
It really is.
There is a specific incident, a manipulative suicide attempt that she stages. She's sobbing uncontrollably at the foot of her bed. She decides to end it all, and she does this by taking exactly 2 sleeping pills with a gulp of NyQuil.
A dosage that is entirely performative, not lethal.
Precisely. But the chilling aspect isn't the dosage, it is the location she chooses. She deliberately leaves her own room and goes into her daughter Nicole's bed to lie down and be found.
Oh, it's awful.
It is pure manufactured trauma. It's an act designed to force a dramatic reaction from Euftis and the children.
It forces him into the role of the hyper-competent adult who has to clean up a manufactured crisis. You know, he is the one who has to handle the paramedics, get her to the hospital, and shield the girls from the fallout.
Right.
But psychologically, that incident is the final severing of their bond. He realizes he cannot fix her, but more importantly, he realizes she is perfectly willing to inflict lasting trauma on their own children just to guarantee she remains the center of his attention.
Wow. Yeah.
Any remaining empathy he had is completely extinguished in that moment.
But, Leata's weaponization of faith doesn't happen in a vacuum. The isolation Euftis feels at home is actually protected and fueled by a broader culture of religious hypocrisy that just permeates their entire social circle.
Yeah, the home is really just the epicenter.
Exactly. Let's look at the community.
Yeah.
Leata herself is described by Euftis as a church groupie. She flirts heavily and inappropriately with visiting pastors, yet constantly judges her husband's spiritual standing.
Right, because the environment they inhabit is deeply systemic. The people surrounding them provide a scaffolding that allows this kind of toxic, performative piety to thrive unchecked.
And the hypocrisy gets much more explicit when we look at Leata's sister, Renetta. Renetta comes to visit and acts incredibly holier than thou. She actually chastises Euftis for using profanity in his own house.
It is an aggressive projection of moral superiority designed to keep him off balance.
But the reality behind that projection is staggering. She openly confesses to Euftis that she is sleeping with her own pastor, a man named Larry.
Pastor Larry.
Yes. Pastor Larry calls her for booty calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, while simultaneously standing in front of his congregation on Sundays preaching fiery sermons against premarital sex.
It's unbelievable.
And Renetta tells Euftis this as if it is a totally normal, acceptable facet of her life.
We are looking at an extreme level of cognitive dissonance here. She has completely severed her religious identity from her physical actions. The language of faith for her, and for Pastor Larry, isn't a moral compass. It is simply a vocabulary they use to maintain social status.
And this pattern just repeats at Euftis's workplace. We meet Michelle, a coworker. She is married to a pastor who rigidly schedules highly vanilla, completely passionless sex.
Right.
He totally neglects her emotional and physical needs, yet he spends his late-night hours locked in his study, supposedly counseling other women from his congregation.
The pattern is undeniable. The authority figures in this world use their spiritual positions as shields for their own indiscretions while enforcing rigid, joyless rules on those beneath them.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Look at Euftis. He is the self-proclaimed sinner of this entire ecosystem.
Yeah, he actively skips church.
He stays home to watch adult films on Sunday mornings. Yet when you look at the actions of everyone around him, Euftis is actually the most honest person in the narrative.
He really is.
He is the only one who isn't hiding his desires or his darker impulses behind a pulpit, a prayer cloth, or a fake suicide attempt.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the church in this narrative isn't depicted as a sanctuary for salvation, spiritual growth, or community support. It is depicted as an elaborate theater.
Yes, a theater of appearances.
It's a stage where people wear pious masks to camouflage their most selfish, destructive impulses. And Euftis's profound disgust with this theatrical hypocrisy becomes the philosophical justification for everything he does next. He sees the masks, he understands the game, and he decides he is going to rip them off.
He is completely, fundamentally disillusioned. You have a battlefield at home and a theater of fakes for a social circle. Now, you have probably been in a situation where your personal life is falling apart and you throw yourself into your career, right?
Sure, you look for a place of logic, order, and competence to anchor yourself.
Right. You seek out an environment where the rules make sense, where effort is rewarded, and where you have some measure of control over the outcome.
Yet Euftis finds the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. If his home is a prison of fake faith, his workplace is a purgatory of sheer, unadulterated absurdity. His career offers no refuge. It just strips away his agency in an entirely different manner.
The author uses these workplace scenes to build a comprehensive psychological profile of a man being compressed from every possible angle.
The daily ritual really sets the tone perfectly. Every single morning, before Euftis even leaves for work, he submerges himself completely in a restored clawfoot tub. He explicitly describes it as building a veneer of peace before facing his commute.
A clawfoot tub is essentially a makeshift sensory deprivation tank.
Oh, that's a good point.
He is so overwhelmed by the noise of his life that he has to submerge himself in water just to armor up for the day.
And he needs that armor for his commute to a Department of Defense project in Beaver Creek, Ohio. I mean, you hear DoD project and you think high stakes, high confidence.
But the reality he steps into is a bureaucratic nightmare completely devoid of meritocracy.
It is maddening to read. His managers, Kurt and Steve, constantly undermine his authority. They hire blatantly unqualified people without his input and then demand that he clean up the resulting catastrophes.
Yeah, they totally hang him out to dry.
Let me give you an example that perfectly captures this environment. He is forced to work with a bleach blonde coworker he literally refers to as a poodle named Nadine.
Yeah, Nadine.
Yeah. They are facing a hard deadline. The project desperately needs a database built to function. It requires maybe 2 hours of overtime to finish. Nadine flat out refuses to stay. And her reason: working late will stress her out too much before her dog Ginger's upcoming dog show.
And you would expect management on a government defense contract to fire her on the spot.
Right.
But they completely capitulate. They accept the excuse of a dog show, let her go home, and leave Euftis holding the bag, forcing him to do her job on top of his own. That is the insidious part of this workplace. It actively punishes competence.
You have probably been in a workplace where incompetence is rewarded, and your hard work just buys you more of someone else's mess. Think about the quiet, corrosive toll that takes on your own sense of agency over time.
It's exhausting.
And it's not just Nadine. Look at Joe. Joe is a boisterous guy who literally used to manage the mailroom. Somehow, through the magic of bureaucracy, he's been promoted to an IT supervisor position.
It makes no sense.
During a Wednesday off-site fish fry, Joe spends the lunch screaming across the table in this booming voice about how he put a highly trained consultant in his place. He is yelling, "I've been a supervisor for 35 years. I knows what I'm doing." He is publicly humiliating Euftis and the other competent engineers by sheer volume and ignorance.
It is an environment that celebrates loud incompetence while silencing quiet expertise. Everywhere Euftis turns, he is forced to submit to people who wield power through entitlement or sheer bureaucratic absurdity.
Euftis's workplace is like a funhouse mirror of his marriage. In both arenas, he is the highly competent adult forced to clean up the messes of entitled, lazy people. Whether it's Leata's manufacturing crises or Nadine's dog show drama, his psyche is acting like a basic hydraulic press at this point. You completely compress his emotional agency at home with a manipulative spouse. You seal off his professional authority at work beneath layers of idiotic management.
And that immense psychological pressure doesn't just evaporate.
No, it has to blow out somewhere. And it finds the path of least resistance, secret, high-stakes, uncompromising physical dominance.
Exactly. When a person is systematically starved for agency in the daylight, they will relentlessly seek out a space where they can be the undisputed master in the dark. This total lack of control sets the stage for a dramatic, deeply unsettling pivot.
Driven to the absolute brink by the pressure, Euftis decides to reclaim his power. And the only arena he has left where he can exert total control is unapologetic, intense sexual dominance.
He transforms from the weary manager of other people's chaos into the exacting orchestrator of his own twisted order.
His evolution here is fascinating. He starts with what we might call pressure valves, immediate physical gratification, before moving into psychological engineering.
Right, the quick fixes. He has these raw, urgent encounters.
Yeah, there is a frantic meetup with a former flame, Coco, where he literally bends her over a sink in her basement laundry room. Then there is LaVette, a married co-worker. He initiates an incredibly bold, dominating encounter right on her office desk with the blinds drawn during work hours.
He isn't seeking intimacy in these moments.
No, he is seeking surrender. He needs that immediate physical submission to prove to himself that he still exists and that his will matters.
Those encounters are impulsive. They are about raw validation. But what he does next with Michelle, the coworker married to the neglectful pastor, requires meticulous, sustained psychological planning.
This is where the story shifts from infidelity to systematic deconstruction. He zeroes in on Michelle's frustration with her passionless marriage. But he doesn't just offer her an affair, he trains her.
Yeah, he gives her explicit, non-negotiable assignments.
He orders her to get a full Brazilian wax. He tells her to practice specific oral sex techniques using bananas and chocolate syrup alone in her house. He literally assigns her Kegel exercises to do throughout her day so she can physically clench her muscles on his command.
Look at what is happening beneath the surface here. Euftis isn't just seeking physical pleasure. He is outsourcing his need for discipline.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
His own life is drowning in chaos. His wife's illness, the dog shows at work, the fake pastors. So he forces the rigid order he craves onto Michelle's physical body. By giving her assignments, he extends his authority over her life, even when they aren't in the same room.
And she complies. There is a pivotal scene that captures the tragedy and the power of this dynamic. They are in his car, stuck in traffic. Euftis reaches over and forcefully touches her thigh.
And Michelle just freezes.
Yeah. She stares out the passenger window, and a single tear rolls down her cheek. In that specific moment, she realizes she is crossing a line she can never uncross. The vow to her pastor husband is broken. The church girl facade is shattered. And yet, she doesn't stop him.
She realizes the gravity of her choice, but she still follows him. Because he is offering her the intense, focused attention and direction she has been starving for, even if it comes wrapped in complete degradation.
She follows him to Hyde Park. In a public park, in the backseat of a car, in broad daylight with strangers walking by, she surrenders to him fully. But here is the detail that shows you how deep Euftis's need for control goes.
This part is wild.
Even the absolute height of this passion, when Michelle scratches his head out of pure ecstasy, he violently snaps at her. He says, "No red sports," meaning no blood.
Right.
He dictates the exact terms of the pleasure and the pain. He demands her total surrender, but he refuses to let her leave a permanent mark on him.
He is the director, the producer, and the solitary audience. She is simply an actor following his highly regulated script.
But the true climax of his revenge against this entire ecosystem of hypocrisy isn't his affair with Michelle. It is his confrontation with Renetta.
Oh, yes.
Leata's holier-than-thou sister. The one sneaking 3 a.m. booty calls with Pastor Larry. Renetta walks into Euftis's home office, wearing nothing but a robe, trying to seduce him while he is deliberately sitting there watching a Mr. Marcus adult film.
Renetta thinks she is initiating a standard, secret affair. She assumes they are both playing the same cynical game. She completely misreads the dynamic and the danger in the room.
She has no idea what she has walked into. Euftis doesn't use the moment for pleasure. He uses it for absolute punishment. He verbally degrades her, repeatedly and aggressively calling her a hoe.
Yeah, it's brutal.
He forces her to perform oral sex, completely dominating her physically and psychologically. And then, when she is begging for him, fully expecting him to consummate the affair and make them complicit, he violently rejects her.
Right.
He grabs a twisted wet towel and literally whips her out of his office. He strips her of her dignity, exposes her hypocrisy, and throws her into the hallway.
That specific mechanism of revenge is brilliant, actually. Why does whipping her with a wet towel matter? Because it violently strips away the sterile, polite, religious language she uses to hide her affairs. It forces her to experience the raw, unglamorous, ugly reality of her actions without the protective shield of her church vocabulary.
So what does this all mean? We have followed him from the victim of a manipulative wife to the master of a secret world. But I have to ask, is Euftis actually breaking free from his cages, or is he just becoming a monster himself?
That is the big question.
I mean, look at what he is actively doing. He is systematically exploiting the deep vulnerabilities and profound neglect of these sexually repressed church girls.
This raises an important question, and it is the central moral ambiguity the author wants you to wrestle with. The text intentionally blurs the line between sexual liberation and psychological exploitation.
Yeah, it really does.
In Euftis's mind, he's a vigilante. He's the great punisher of hypocrites, using their hidden desires as a weapon to expose the extreme fragility of their virtuous facades. He believes he is delivering a harsh, necessary truth. But objectively, he is using coercion, power imbalances, and emotional manipulation to get exactly what he wants.
He is playing an angry god in the bedroom because he has been stripped of all power in the boardroom and the living room.
Precisely. He cannot fix his wife, he cannot fix his career, and he cannot fix the church. So he substitutes genuine emotional intimacy and structural change with raw physical dominance.
Let's pull all of this together. We've taken a deep dive into a profoundly raw collision of worlds today. We started with a marriage neglected and manipulated to the point of madness.
Right.
We examined an elaborate societal theater of religious hypocrisy where everyone is playing a pious part to hide their sins. We looked at the crushing absurdity of a workplace that actively punishes competence and rewards the loudest fool.
Yes, all of it.
And standing in the dead center of it all is a man who decides that if he cannot find genuine connection, respect, or agency in the light, he will relentlessly demand absolute submission in the dark.
It is a dark, inevitable evolution, and it leaves you with something highly critical to mull over. Euftis successfully escapes the psychological cage of his loveless marriage and his infuriating job through this weaponization of sexual power.
He does.
He gets his revenge on the hypocrites. But if your entire sense of control and self-worth relies on degrading others, manipulating their vulnerabilities, and hiding in the shadows, have you really broken free?
Oh, wow.
Or have you just poured the concrete for a darker, much lonelier cage of your own design?
That is the ultimate question this book leaves you with. If the foundational contract of love and trust rots away, the ruthless terms you write to replace it might just end up trapping you even worse than before. Thank you for joining us on this intense deep dive. It is a heavy narrative to process, but we encourage you to keep looking closely at the situations around you and always keep questioning the true motives behind the masks people wear.